Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and this is the Scavenger Curved Sword bleed build. I decided to test this build out. I was told by a lot of people that this was the best bleed build, so I figured I'd put together two Scavenger Curved Swords with the Occult and go through the entire game on New Game +7 max scaling. I believe this is around Journey 11 or so. I think I showed it there, and see how much damage we can do and whether or not this is truly the best bleed build in Eldenring. Before we continue though, if you're not subbed, definitely sub to this channel. If you love overpowered Elden Ring builds, I've been doing a ton of builds lately and I'm going to continue doing more. It's been awesome so far. Now, we're going to add some stuff to this as we go. Eventually, we're going to pick up the white mask too that people kept mentioning in the comments on the last one. I know I'm not a fan of it cosmetically, but for the extra 10% damage, we might as well throw it in there. At the end of this video, we'll have the entire build, stats at 150, everything you'll need. This is a 150 character on Journey 11. It stays that way for the purpose of my videos and whatnot, so that the builds can stay meta relevant, even though we are high up in the journeys at this point. As you can tell, this does a lot of damage. As far as pure damage goes, the Occult Scavenger Curved Swords does a lot. It does significantly more damage than the Twinblades. However, we're going to have to compare the two in comparison to bleed as well. Speaking of which, I'm going to leave that other bleed build in the description so that's there if you need it, and that's going to be the Twinblades. So for the Twinblades, you're going to get more bleed on each hit because I believe they end up being in the 120s, maybe even low 130s. As far as the Occult Scavenger Curved Sword with 60 Arcane, I'm getting around 84 before Seppuku, but we're getting a lot more damage out of it because it's Occult. It still has innate bleed on it, and you can throw Seppuku on top of it. And we're going to talk about a bunch of different reasons, but ultimately, at least for me, as this goes on, I think this is the most powerful bleed build. I think this is really potent, this is really strong, and it has a lot of regular damage to complement the bleed procs that you're going to get. And that's a big deal, especially for bosses that are resistant to bleed. This is a very good way to hit them hard too, while also proccing bleed, even if it's slightly not as fast with the Occult on the Scavenger Curved Sword. So we have to test it on every single boss on the max scaling game that's main or mandatory. By the way, they're all going to be here. So if you need help with any single boss, just look at this video on how to handle it. And even somebody like myself who doesn't do bleed builds very often, and honestly, I missed a whole bunch with my jump attacks. There's a few funny ones later. It's going to be very interesting in that regard. Definitely am not the best with aiming the jump attacks. It does take a little bit to get used to with the jump attacks. Now, that's where you get the Scavenger Curved Sword. If you're curious, you get it in Mount Gelmar. I believe it's 1 per playthrough. And here we go. We're going to test this on Mohg on the max scaling of the game because he's a very good test dummy on how quickly we can get him to not phase, which is very, very good. And I can compare it directly to the Twinblade this way. So we're going to have to compare the two. Now, the Twinblades, I remember he had just phased, I believed, and then I killed him with the Twinblades. For this, I wanted to see if I could stop him from phasing entirely, even though he has 30,000 HP and we're on the max scaling of the game. Going to use the Shackle, of course, because he's a test dummy at this point, and we have to have a comparison. Plus, I used the Shackle for the Twinblade as well, and to see how quickly I can phase him. And look at this. He goes really quickly, even quicker than the Twinblade. Didn't even get a chance to go to phase 2. That was incredibly easy. So far right there, that tells me if you're looking for the best bleed build, especially the best bleed build with attack damage, then it might be the Scavenger Curved Sword. This was really good. You're going to see this continue on and get even better. It's kind of an awesome build for bleed builds. It really is. I hadn't tried it yet. I didn't even have 2 of these. I had to go through my last playthrough to grab one, and then another playthrough, like halfway through, run up to Mount Gelmar and get a second one because I play mostly solo. Didn't even really try these. A lot of people suggested it to me, and now look at this. They're very good. I will admit, they're definitely quite good, and might even be better than the other options, even if the other options might proc a little faster, especially early on. Another reason why I really like doing this video here is that I wanted to do something on the max scaling. A lot of people comment and they're like, well, what about the later journeys, Matt? How does this handle in the later journeys? How does this do later on? Because a lot of people play through even if they're meta level, and they'll keep playing through new game cycles. Well, as you can tell here on the max scaling of the game, it actually holds up quite well because between the percentage damage and the fact that we're just doing a lot more attack in general, even when you're not proccing, you're still hitting like a truck with 2 curved swords, which is really awesome. And the jump attacks hitting 4 times, we're hitting for a whole bunch of damage while proccing bleed in between. And it's a great combination that really complements the game, honestly, for bleed builds. And it's something that can last you through all of the journeys and also through a various number of situations like this, for instance, where we're talking about Golden Shade and you're going to see Elden Beast at the end and stuff, and even bosses that are bleed resistant, while still doing a lot of damage, because the pure amount of damage with that B and Arcane from the Occult and the damage we're getting out of them, I think over 500 each or so, is a lot. It really is a lot. It adds up to a lot. And it takes care of bosses that don't even proc bleed pretty well and very quickly in this instance, that they go down. And as you can see, Golden Shade there didn't even last too long with the jump attacks, as we're still doing chunks of damage with it without proccing any bleed. Well, Morgott, you say that's going to be tough. Well, it's never going to be tough, because I always like using the shackles. They're fun to use, especially when you're testing bleed builds, because it gives you an opportunity to see how good it is. Odds are I could probably have stopped him from phasing, but due to my poor jumping skills, which you're going to see there's some really funny ones later, I missed him a couple of times and it kind of prevented that from happening. Even so, though, went over and did one final jump attack. Goodbye, Morgott. Not too difficult there, even with his HP being up and stuff from being on New Game +7 or max scaling or whatever. He still went down very fast, and that was incredibly easy. Now it's time for the Fire Giant, though, who has 63,000 HP. So for the Fire Giant here, it wasn't too difficult. I was able to hit the ankle pretty hard. I think eventually Seppuku may or may not run out. He's got a lot of HP here. My jump attacks weren't perfect. I did get in there though and proc some bleed while proccing, well, not proccing, but hitting for a lot of general damage. And in the first phase, he's not too difficult. Once you know the Fire Giant well, his first phase is actually very, very easy as far as melee goes. In the second phase is a little more stout, because his weak parts are all basically the danger zone, where in the first phase his foot is actually relatively, or ankle rather, is relatively safe. In the second phase, his weak points like his hands and I believe his head or whatever else, or the eyeball on his chest and everything, it's kind of hard to get to without putting yourself in positions where you might get hit, especially in the later journeys where a lot of the stuff that he does so much enormous physical damage that you can be one hit by it. Is phase 2 going to be difficult? Well, not really, because, and I'm on Xbox here, we use Y and LB and then Y and RB back to proc both, but we're going to have time to proc both Seppuku and then go at him with the bleed build. So if you're a mage or anything like that, or you're using lightning, anything in that regard, just remember you have a lot of time and then go up to him. You can tell here that his resistances are high as far as melee goes, but you'll still be able to get the bleed procs on him while doing enough damage to take him down. It does take a little bit in the second phase if you're not going for his weak points, simply going for his leg like I was here, and I'm able to do enough damage to take the big guy down, proc bleed I think maybe once or twice, and it did overall pretty fantastic damage for the fact that he has over 60,000 HP. Now for the Godskin Duo, if you're going to use sleeping pots like I did in this instance just to see how well it was, and honestly I needed to anyway, because the fact of the matter is I did, I think, for the Twinblade, so I was still kind of comparing the two, and we're going to talk about that as we go. But for this instance, sleeping pots work fantastic. You can shred them, you can even damage them after they're dead further. I messed up on the first one while not doing it because they were very close, but on the second one I was able to hit after he died and proc I think one more time, because for some reason you can hit them after they die and they'll take additional damage. You might be able to get both entirely, but I think they have close to 40,000 HP together on the max scaling, so it is a little bit difficult in that regard. As far as them though, they're not too hard. If you use sleeping pots, obviously you can take advantage of that. They also are not very resistant to bleed, and they take good general damage from the Scavenger curved swords as well. So we made quick work of them. They're not overly difficult at the end here. You can tell he kind of stretched out on me with very little amount of HP, but it happens from time to time. We're not going to worry about him. He can dodge the sleeping pots, by the way, but if he gets close to the other one, you can actually use sleeping pots on both. So this boss here isn't mandatory, but he will hit you in the back of the door if you try to do buffs or anything. And honestly, in some instances, he's really annoying and people have a hard time with him. The main thing here with the tough Draconic Tree Sentinel is when he goes to his second phase, he gives you another opportunity to continue to attack him. Just continue to attack him. Do not stop attacking him, and he will go down with a lot of different builds because he has that phase transition. Okay, so all the way from the beginning of the game, where I think I had 1 or 2 deaths from something that I can't even remember, I actually went a very long time without dying again. The next time I would die would be to Maliketh twice. I got him on the 3rd try. a little bit tricky. He's always a little bit challenging, but initially I tried to do the proccing stuff like ahead of time, but I eventually settled for, I think after around the third try, just to say to myself, hey, I'll just use the bandit curve swords, or sorry, the scavenger curve swords, rather, on their own, because they do so much damage in general. I'm not even going to worry about proccing Seppuku for the second phase, even though you could stand behind a pillar and do it or something in the first phase if you need to. I was like, nah, let's just go at him, attack him the regular way, and see how this goes. And when I settled for that, I ended up doing a lot better, not thinking too much about Seppuku, and being content with just the regular overall good amount of damage that we're able to do. The single best tip for Maliketh that I could ever give you is staying underneath him. Going far away from him literally sets him into a ton of animations that will do his most ridiculously annoying attacks. If you stay near him or close to him, life gets so much better and it's a lot easier. Now for Gideon here, this is pretty hilarious. I missed a jump attack entirely, and he still went down because it's Gideon. I don't think we need to explain that one, but funny nonetheless to see me completely miss there. Now, my next death here was from Godfrey once. I got him on the second try, and that was only because I got greedy and just went completely crazy with the jump attacks on him initially. Staying close to him is always a good option. The jump attacks do good damage, the bleed procs pretty quickly, and don't forget, he has a couple of phase type transition things that he's going to want to do that are going to give you some extra breathing room as you fight him. So for Godfrey, as I mentioned there, it's definitely true in terms of the phase transition, because eventually he's going to want to put his leg up to start the stomping phase, and you're going to take advantage of that because it's a very, very long animation. In my instance, I think I needed to heal, but if you don't need to heal, feel free to get in your jump attacks, do a lot of damage, and get him to second phase. And in the second phase, believe it or not, Horaloo turns out to be a very generous enemy. Yeah, he's incredibly generous in the fact that when you step back from his initial attack animation, it gives you an insanely large window to attack him with whatever you're using. As soon as you dodge that first attack, that grapple miss, there'll be a lot of time for you to attack him, to get your jump attacks in. And if you're doing anything like lightning or mages or anything like that, you can take advantage of that too, and you can probably get him before he even does any other attacks. It's a very generous window when he misses that initial grapple attack. So is this the ultimate bleed build? Well, we're going to fight a boss now that is completely immune and resistant to a bleed. Sorry I lost the beginning of the clip there, but I just ran in and jump attacked him. Radagon did kill me 3 or 4 times. I got them together on the 4th or 5th try. They killed me more than any other boss in this run, which still says a lot about how powerful the build is. But in this instance, Radagon was kind of a pain because I had to practice timing my jump attacks. I wasn't that great at them. I was missing him consistently, and the ability for him to just constantly spam was very, very annoying and hard to deal with. Plus, on the max scaling of the game, believe it or not, Radagon has 20,000 HP, which is actually close to what Elden Beast starts at on a new game cycle. So it becomes a glass cannon that is a little bit tanky as well, and he's immune to bleed, obviously, but even so, he takes a lot of damage with my level 150 build here, and then once I got to Elden Beast, I was able to take Elden Beast down on the first try, because Elden Beast is the ultimate stamina check in the end. He's not really so much a boss as he is testing everything you know at this point. So while this fight wasn't difficult, I did have to run around several times, and I had to run around several times because he just runs around a lot in general. Even so, though, as you're going to see in some clips here, he takes a lot of damage, just general damage from this build, which makes me really happy in the end because with the Twinblades, you're doing less damage. So anything that's not going to proc bleed, you have to think, well, do I need to respec? In the instance of the Scavenger curve sword, I think in the end it is the best because you don't have to respec, because you can go and attack whatever enemy you want to attack. Even if they're resistant to bleed, they're still going to take a lot of pure damage because you're doing more damage in general, even if you're proccing slightly, and very slightly, less. Which makes up for the fact that you're using a bleed weapon while still getting a lot of damage out of it. So when people suggested this to me and commented on my channel and asked me to do a build and what the best bleed build is, I think we have an answer. The Scavenger Curve Sword is technically the best bleed build in the game, simply for the fact that you can do a ton of damage with it while also proccing bleed. It's going to do more damage than the Twinblades. The Bandit Curve Swords are great too, and they can do a lot of bleed, but again, you're using them in blood, not a Colt. This will scale with a Colt, get you 84 bleed before Seppuku anyway, and with 60 Arcane, I think my character has 50 Dex as well, we're doing over 500 damage per each one before buffs, jump attacks, or anything like that. For anyone wondering, a Colt on a regular weapon, I believe it ends up taking the bleed off. For a weapon that has innate bleed, though, the innate bleed will scale with that occult, while also the damage of it seems to scale with the occult as well, giving you a B in occult in this instance and having 60 arcane. That gives you a lot of damage. I hope that information is helpful when you're using stuff or like using different affinities in that regard. Probably should go with blood for a lot of instances, but if you happen to have a good innate bleed weapon like the Scavenger curved swords that have excellent jump attacks, then you can go occult, get higher bleed that it normally would have on it, 84 instead of 45 or whatever, and also get very good damage as well. And keep in mind, too, that when it comes to bleed proccing, even enemies that are weak to bleed, their resistances will gradually go up. So say Mohg's first is 300, his second might be 5, his third might be 700. I don't know the exact numbers, but if you're doing more damage in general, pure damage, then you're going to make up for those in-between proccing times and still do a lot, which is really helpful. So for this setup, we have two Scavenger curved swords. They're both plus 25, and they both have the occult. We have any seal will do. We got the white mask this time around, the Raptor's black feathers, claw talisman, rotten wing sword insignia, Millicent's prosthesis, Lord of Blood's exaltation, and then we have the consecutive attack tier as well. I have the Faith tier in there as well, and that's just to do buffs like Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow. And these are my stats at 150. I went for 60 Arcane, 50 Dexterity, 50 Vigor. You can move stuff around. They're probably not perfect. This is from my own testing and kind of guesswork. But in this instance, I think the most important stat is the 60 Arcane and the ability to do a couple buffs as well, while also having whatever Vigor that you really choose to have, and a decent amount of Endurance too, because obviously that's going to help with the jump attacks. There we have it. There's every boss on the max scaling of the game, at least the main ones. Hope you guys enjoyed that. If you're not subbed and you love overpowered PvE builds, definitely sub to this channel. There's a ton of great builds on it. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll catch you guys there.